Dr. Yo, he's a national known doctor that's a soils advocate that is pro organics. He has a following in Australia and New Zealand, and he puts on day seminars. Australia and New Zealand have no infrastructure for agriculture, so if you put on a meeting, you charge. So he would go there and he'd put a meeting on soils and eating good food. And he came to one of my organic vegetables and he said, "You need to go to New Zealand with me in Australia." And he said, "We're going to have 2 days seminars. I'm going to talk and you're going to do your dog and pony show on cattle." In my book, I show you how to read cattle. You can read how much butter fat, you can read how much protein is in the milk. And this is all German stuff. And anyway, so we go to New Zealand. And we get to New Zealand, and Fonterra has checked into this A1 milk, A2 milk. This has been sitting on the shelf. They knew that the casein, the protein in milk, had changed for some reason a while back. So they hired Keith Woodford, who is a research scientist at the University in Queensland, and he looks at structured water at A1, A2. So they find out that about 5,000 years ago, along the Mediterranean here, which there's the tectonic plates, remember Vesuvius and Pompeii in AD 97 erupted, and they had this cloud. They hypothesized that there was volcanic activity on the south edge of Europe that put Europe into a dust cloud for 1 or 2 years. This meant no vitamin D. So casein, which is a protein that you make cheese out of, and you learned in 8th grade math that protein is made out of amino acids. 209 amino acids long was casein. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Number 67 was proline. They think a virus might have been involved, and it flipped to histidine. The histidine bond with 66, which is isoleucine, is weak. And so upon digestion or pasteurization, heat, this breaks off. And it brings 6 more little amino acids with us, and we call it BCM7. Why? Because it's beta-casomorphine 7. This little 7-chunk protein is addictive, and it causes inflammation in all the glands in the body. Remember this morning, I showed you the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the thyroid, the thymus, the adrenal gland, and that's your endocrine system. Okay, it screws up the endocrine system. This little, and it causes inflammation. And the Amish were the first to really notice this and prove that this is happening, because the Amish use nursing as birth control. Humans are A2. Sheep are A2. Goats are A2. Most of the cattle in Europe flipped this here, and this is called A1A1, where histidine is here. So this Holstein, this cow that they got that came over from Europe is A1 milk. So little Johnny, or we'll call him Amos, he gets within 30 hours of drinking this A1 milk that he's never drank before because he's been on mama, or if mama can't nurse. The Amish are very, very, very communal. The sister-in-law, or there's a wet nurse, everybody nurses their baby to 6, 8, 10 months. And the first time they drink this A1, they'll get a rash, a stomach rash. They do a lot of salivating, and they think, I think he's getting a tooth. The kid's nausea, he's just miserable. He's crying, he's fussing. They get a diarrhea, and they notice this. We got a kid allergic to milk. They go to the family clinic and they go, well, you got to get a history. Well, you must be allergic to milk. 70% of milking allergies can drink A2A2 milk. So this Dr. Wilford figured this out. Now, there were some cows, England is up here, there were some cows in Western Europe that didn't get a lot of. In 1788, England empties their prison. They sent 800 prisoners to Sydney, Australia, along with some cows. The cows that went to Sydney, Australia had a higher percentage of A2A2 because they weren't under this dust cloud. The cows that my German friends and all the Scandinavians around, and the Polish, all these cows that came over on the ship that went to Central America were all A1 cows. This Dr. Woodford does an epidemiological study. Now, the cows in Africa here, these are Bos taurus, and they were from the steppes of Russia. They domesticated the cow 12,500 years ago. The prehistoric auroch was domesticated. What's grown on the steppes of Russia? Grass. There's no corn science here, okay? They were lucky. Bos indicus is the Brahmas, all of the different African cows, they're all A2A2. Societies that drink this milk have a higher incidence of schizophrenia, diabetes, and heart problems. The Africans have a much lower incidence of those maladies. Now, if you're from Somalia and you go to Africa, you're going to stay the same. If you're from Somalia and you come to the United States and drink A1 milk, then you have the same heart problems and all. It's an epidemic. This Dr. Woodford said we should not be feeding our children A1 milk. Fonterra is the only co-op in New Zealand and Australia. The co-ops kept emerging, and about 15, 18 years ago, Australia and New Zealand said, okay, all you little guys, you're no longer existent. We're more efficient. They have one big milk company. They control the harbors. They control everything. So Fonterra said there's 5.5 million cows in New Zealand right now and 5 million people. They export 97% of all the milk in the world market. Same way with there's 22 million people in Australia, and they've got a lot of cows. They got milk export. And so Fonterra said, you shut your mouth. We got A1 milk we're exporting. Then this Dr. Woodford said, no, I'm going to tell the masses, I'm going to write this book. We were there with Dr. Anderson speaking. Him and I were doing these, we got $700 for 3 days. I mean, and if you don't charge, then nobody comes. The more you charge, the bigger they come. I love it. So we spent. Anyway, the book just came out. And there was so they patented this entrepreneur, had a couple hundred cows, and he patented A2A2 milk. And it was looking like he wanted the royal. And it's a DNA test. It's the DNA, okay? And so everybody was kind of afraid of it. I bought a liter of milk. My wife went along, and his parents went along, and I drank a liter of milk. It tasted good. I washed it out and put it in my suitcase. I got 2 issues of his book out of the suitcase. Organic Valley is sending 22% of our milk is going to Stonyfield Yogurt on the East Coast. And Stonyfield Yogurt is buying all our milk in the same one. And I thought, what happens if Fonterra comes in there and says, we got A2A2 milk for your yogurt? We can lose 25% of the business. And I thought, we got to pay attention to this and pull our head out of the sand. So I go and I take this milk jug and this book and I go to the upper management and I said, you got to read this. This is important. I go back a month later and the book's sitting there with us. I said, you didn't do anything with this. I don't know. That's a pyramid. They went poo-poo. I said, folks, this is true. There's science behind this. George Seaman called the A2A2 network. And George would call me at 9 o'clock at night. I was the first veterinarian on staff, and he'd say, I've got a job for you. What's that? Oh, I want you to look up how many wells in America are loaded with atrazine that you can't use. No. Can you do that in a week? Yeah, so I leave it out and put a report on the test. And then, hey, you want to go to California? They just imposed in Boston area. I want you in Boston corner. So I called him and I thought, I said, George, I'm getting a lot of pushback on this A2A2. I'm representing you. What am I supposed to say? I said, I got a lot of naysayers in your group. He said, tell them the story and tell them we're watching it. And that's all they did. 10 years ago, I said, we should be John Kennedy and say in 10 years, we want all our cattle to be old and we want everybody to have eat milk. Now they're inviting me back to the annual meeting because they're getting back to the research of them. This A2 is going to go. This A2 is going to go. This is in the DNA, and so this went to Europe. Europe challenged it, and you can't patent Mother Nature, so that patent. So there it is. If you want to know about A2A2, there's a DNA test. The company is GeneSeek in Lincoln, Nebraska. GENE, by that GeneSeek. For $15, you call it, and you pull tail hairs backwards out of the tail. And you gotta have the root, and it's $15, and they'll tell you if it's A1, A2, or A1, A1, or A2, A2. Now, what's really neat about this is not a recessive or dominant, it's a simple Mendelian genetics. Remember the Mendelian monks that did with the bees? It's a straight 50-50. If you've got an A2 cow, bull, okay, and all of the bull studs now have been identified, you breed that to an A1 cow, you're going to get 50-50. You're going to get A1, A2, A2, A1. What's nice is the milk will only be half protein and half histamine. You get rid of half of the histamine of the bad right in one cross. Now you come back on an A1, A2 cow with an A2, A2 bull, it drops 75% of it is now A2 and 25 is A1. And it's a 2-year turnaround. So in 2, 4, 6 years, you can be at 87.5. You just about get rid of it in 5 and 10 years. Organic Valley farmers did not laugh at it. They jumped on it. And we probably have in Organic Valley milk, I'm saying that half that milk is A2A2. We have farmers that are going to be leaving us because on the East Coast there's about 3 companies who only market A2A2. You got it out here. Go to Safeway.
We got it at our store right here at the Lourdes.
Yeah.
Full A2A2 milk, half and half.
That's Alexander Dairy.
Alexander Dairy.
You know who that is? They're A2A2 because the very first time I was there, Stephanie and Blake jumped on it. They got 1,400 A2 cows. They're marketing their own milk. They got a tiger got a tail. And you take that, it's 8% protein.
So
It's
good.
not, and you put that in oatmeal, the breakfast food, it is the diet.
We also have dairies here in Montgomery County that are running A2A2 herds.
Yes,
We
sir.
have shared one.
Okay, that's the A2A2 story. Hang on, so there'll become more. There's a lot of cutting edge things happening in. So, we're kind of past our time.